All right. Well, before we get started this afternoon, I have one announcement / advertisement. These beautiful 2024 calendars, hot off the presses yesterday, EPAT calendars with beautiful scenes of San Angelo from paintings that were done over the last 9 years. Unfortunately, we don't have any in it from this year, but it is a gorgeous calendar it's absolutely printed beautifully designed beautifully. And Q's Printing printed these. Bailey Upton, our graphic designer at the museum, designed them. And they are gorgeous. They are available for sale for $20 each. They make a great gift, great San Angelo souvenir as well. But I just want to point out, if you are a volunteer, if you are an artist that's here for the competition, if you are an EPAT ambassador artist, if you are an EPAT sponsor, please pick one of these up. It is our gift to you, a small token of our appreciation for your enormous help. And we really just can't thank you enough. So please make sure you get your calendar if you're an EPAT volunteer, an EPAT ambassador artist, an EPAT competition artist, or a sponsor. And, thank you. And you can also buy them for $20. I did just want to point out, the bottom of this has a hole in it for hanging. But I would recommend not hanging it from there. I'd recommend putting a little hook or something in the ring and hanging it like this. But again, we are proud of these gorgeous calendars, and it's a beautiful way to commemorate our 10th anniversary. Now I'll hand it over to Barbara.
Okay, and our little mini pearls of the conchos, you might wonder where we came up with that title. There are several allusions to that name, and I'd like to first introduce our sponsors of this award, probably for every year that we've been doing this for 10 years. Tom and Minnie Fran Gregg. Would y'all come? Some of you aren't old enough to know about this. The mini pearls of the you don't have to come up. You don't have to come up. You want a howdy?
Yes,
just a quick howdy.
I will. We're so glad you're here. How many of you artists, this is your first time in San Angelo? Stand up, stand up, stand up. Oh, yay. How many of you artists, it's your first plein air event anywhere? Well, no, Harsh. And for those of you that may not know, Harsh is not only here in San Angelo for his very first plein air event, but he flies back to London and then flies to India to be married very soon.
Thank you, Tom and Fran, for always taking care of this award. We have 4 $500 awards to give today.
Interruption. Barbara can't stand when her agenda is interrupted, but we have an interruption. And it's all right, Barbara. Would Barbara and Ellen and Treva and Sharon come up here? If they can.
It's not part of the...
It's not on your agenda.
The judge is waiting.
The judge knows about it. Laura Huckabee. Where's Treva? All right, Tom.
Should we go down here? Should we come down here?
Oh, you're good.
Treva's feet. Treva's feet.
Oh, Treva's feet.
You wanna
Yeah, we.
Come on up. Come on down. For 10 years now, the San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts has been the beneficiary of this event. And it has grown every year, and it has become one of the very primary fundraising events for the museum and our education program. We just wanted to do a small token of appreciation to these founders. And so we would like to present the 2023 Founders Award, and I'll call on our judge.
See, when you go eat Mexican food with the Greggs, they give you a new job. And they warned me that Barbara didn't like any disruptions from her carefully constructed agenda. So I'm going to read what I was told to read, mainly because the Mexican food was excellent, because they can't make Mexican food in Oklahoma. The 2023 EnPleinAirTEXAS Founders Award is a special award honoring Barbara Rallo, Treva Boyd, Helen Lassiter, and Sharon Alexander, and the entire EPAT gang for 10 years of artistic vision, dedication, and plain old hard work to make the vision come true. This award is presented to the artist whose work most exemplifies the spirit of the plein air artist, which includes arising early, working late, accepting the weather as it is, seeing the beauty of the world and putting it on canvas for the rest of us to enjoy. And I'll add a caveat because they told me what I needed to do, and I wanted something that represented San Angelo too. This award is in the amount of $750 and is sponsored by the San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts and Fran and Tom Gregg. The winning artist is Lon Brower for his painting Making Boots.
Do all this yourself up here without me?
You're up here doing a good job. My duties as judge keep unfolding every day. I guess I needed to read the fine print because my manager wife is at home fussing at me because she said it's already right there in the instructions. And I, of course, can't read the back of the printed page, so I didn't realize some of this until I got here. So the mini pearl category is something that came in kind of late yesterday, and I'm a sucker for a small painting because, as some of you know, I've done a lot of studying of an artist here from Texas named Frank Reaugh. The average size of his paintings is 3.5 by 7 inches, and most of those are done in pastel. So I have a special fondness in my heart for small things. And by the way, my wife is 4'11". She'd probably kill me for telling you that, but anyway. And I think she's shrinking because she might be a little shorter than that. I was to select 4, and this was really as tough as it gets because it's always a real challenge to do an interesting composition and a great plein air painting in that small format. Mr. Reaugh was a master at it, so I had to have you reach a pretty high bar. So the first artist is Vlad Duchev. Thank you. I guess there's more picture taking. Still for sale, still available. Second artist is Alex Eisenzoff. Okay. Next is Michael Compton. There it is, for sale. Yep. Is Michael Compton here? There he is. Alex. Alex here? Nope. And last is David Diaz. Here you go, Barbara.
You don't need me anymore. I'll take these. And you're just going to start there. You don't have to start. Don't talk about the ones that you didn't do.
Yes, ma'am.
How's that? That'll speed it up. So not that. Okay.
Okay.
10th anniversary.
I'm used to being managed by women. My mom's a strong personality, so is my sister. And of course, the 4'11" person I share a life with, Leslie, she does the same sort of thing. She was making sure my hair was parted before I left the little apartment over at the chicken farm. She manages me long distance, you know. My time here is to discuss the paintings that I selected as award winners, but I wanted to give you a little overview first about some things that I've been thinking about in the last couple of days. One of which is to help you get more familiar with me and my working process and how I do this sort of thing. I mentioned Frank Ray several times over the last couple of days, and I became familiar with Mr. Ray's work when I was a grad student at SMU. And no, I didn't know how to pronounce his name either, not at first. R-E-A-U-G-H is pronounced Ray. And I was charged with finding the university art collection that was scattered all over campus with really no tracking other than they thought it was in X building. So when I gathered those things, and eventually we brought everything back to the Meadows Museum at SMU, which is primary focus is on Spanish art, and they were by default in charge of at least monitoring the university art collection. It was really my first introduction to Texas art, mainly paintings and sculpture and printmaking. But I got interested in Mr. Ray because I always loved to draw as a little kid, and all my school books were covered with drawings of horses for the most part, cowboys, etc. And I thought I wanted to go to art school because I really wasn't sure what to do, because I had prayed that God would make me run faster than a 5.2 40, and he didn't give me that wish. I also wanted to be taller than 5'7", maybe 5'10" would have been good. Didn't get there either, so I got to 6'4". That's to make sure everybody's paying attention. So my dreams of a professional football career went down on the third day of 2 days that I told you about when I wrecked my right shoulder, and that now has a Teflon bolt that sets all the alarms off at the airport. This one's got a screw in it, and it's fixing to get more screws because I jacked it up again. But in any case, I also wanted to be a cowboy, but I was born in the wrong century, I thought. So I became the next best thing in my mind as a cowboy historian. But I loved making art, or at least I thought I did, until I got to art school and took the classes. Loved the figure drawing classes, not so much the painting classes, because the paint didn't dry fast enough, so then I discovered pastel. And of course it dries real fast because it's already dry. So when I ran into Mr. Reaugh in grad school, after spending an internship at what's now the Smithsonian American Art Museum, it's where I got started these 40 years ago as an exhibit specialist, mainly because I could run a table saw. That's why they put me in the basement. But I was surrounded by those great 18th and 19th century American masters, not the least of whom was George Catlin. And of course, George Catlin went up into the wilds of the Missouri River in 1832 carrying panel paintings, and I was discussing, I think, with Lon Brewer yesterday, what a challenge that was, is to haul those panels all the way up the Missouri River. It must have been quite a production. And of course, the subsequent artists who made it out to the frontier usually painted in watercolor, small watercolors. They're usually associated with the engineering program at West Point, where everyone who graduates as a second lieutenant is a trained engineer. But they are also trained in watercolor painting. So you went on one of these government expeditions, whether it was finding the source of the Red River or finding the most direct path for a transcontinental railroad. They sent artists with them because nobody had a smartphone. I don't have a smartphone, by the way. I still carry a flip phone because I'm very proud of it because I don't get all the mess that many of you get. I have learned that anymore, sadly, it's the picture of you doing something rather than you actually doing something. And that's not a good state of affairs, so remember that. So I eventually went to grad school at SMU, as I mentioned before, and then became curator of art at Panhandle Plains Historical Museum, which has the most comprehensive Texas art collection in the state, and up to very recently had the only permanent gallery of early Texas art in the state. I learned recently they just took it down. It breaks my heart, and I can't help but not say that to you, because that collection was largely about collecting taste for people in the Panhandle. But the Frank Ray collection came to the museum in 1966, 21 years after Mr. Ray had passed. So I got to ride herd on 600 works in color by Mr. Ray and another 400 works in black and white or photographs, and it was a real blessing. So my biography on Mr. Ray, called Rounded Up in Glory, you're welcome to take a look at that. University of North Texas Press sends me about 12 cents per book. So I'm not trying to sell my book, but it does have interesting information about where Mr. Ray went, especially in West Texas. And the Concho Valley was one of his favorite places to paint. So you are standing on the shoulders of, in my opinion, a giant when you come out here to paint on plein air. So thank you for what you do. So when I'm asked to judge contemporary art, and it's kind of a running joke that because I'm an art historian, and the work that I do now at the National Cowboy Museum has nothing to do with pre to West. I don't have a vote, I don't have a voice, I'm not involved in that process whatsoever. So the joke is, if an artist isn't dead, I won't look at your work. Well, there's some truth in that because, the dead ones are never late, they don't procrastinate, and they don't complain about the lighting being wrong or whatever. So there are some advantages to working with deceased artists. But I am called to judge and jury exhibitions like this one, and I'm so proud to be here in San Angelo again. It's one of my favorite places in West Texas. My dear friend, Dr. William Elton Green, was the first historian of Fort Concho, and he worked at Panhandle Plains with me as our curator of history, and he just passed earlier this year. So what I'm going to say today, I'm going to dedicate to my good friend Billy. So when I judge an art show, first of all, I don't want to see anybody's name because I don't want any sort of a sense that there's preferential treatment. And so unfortunately, because they're so efficient here with the Plein Air Texas show, everything was perfectly labeled. So I had to pretend that I wasn't seeing any of your names. Most of you I don't know, and that's fine. I've met a couple of you the last time I was here, but it's my job to be as objective as possible. And an art historian has to fight our subjectivity all the time, because of course we have preferences. We're subjective vessels. So here's what I will tell you. The first thing that I want to see when I see a work of art is I want to see work. I don't want to see facility. All of you are skilled. I don't want to see your skill. I want to see your heart, and I want to see your soul, not just your brain. When I was in high school, we had this hippy-dippy teacher in English who one of his favorite books was 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. Perhaps we should have listened low these many years ago in the 1970s. Anyway, the argument of this particular author was that what you see on the screen is not really on your screen, it's assembled in your brain. Therefore, if your dog's barking at the TV, they're not barking at a dog on the TV, they're barking at the flashy lights on the screen. I wonder if that's true or not. And so I tend to juxtapose that onto what the Impressionists talked about seeing when they were in plein air painting. Were they really seeing boats on the sand, or were they actually seeing peasants in the field, or were they actually only seeing the presence of direct sunlight or indirect sunlight, natural light on a surface? And I happen to lean towards the latter, because your brain assembles the picture. So when I talk about work from you, I don't want to see what you painted that came out of your head. I want to see what you painted, especially in the plein air context, what you saw in front of you. You didn't paint what you knew, you paint what you saw, and that's an important distinction. And we talk about this particularly because I'm a scholar of American art, and one of our giants in this industry is a woman named Barbara Novak from the School of Fine Arts from Columbia University, who talks a lot about painting what you know or painting what you see. And the great Hudson River School master Thomas Cole always said he didn't like painting direct from nature because he wanted the veil of time to obscure the details. So he painted in the studio, only making color notes in pencil. That's not plein air painting. Plein air painting is painting direct in front of the subject. And today it was challenging to you, and I watched many of you struggle, and I heard some of you even say, well, only if the sun came out. I wonder if Pizarro said, oh, if only the sun would come out. Did he? I don't know. Did Mary Cassatt say that? I don't know. So think about that, and that's what I'm looking for. Here's the other thing. Now, as a professional historian and a professional art historian, I'm the least politically correct person you're ever going to meet in your life. Fair warning, okay? And I say this every time I give a gallery tour or every time I give a lecture. I always start there because it's a warning. It's like a warning on a pack of cigarettes. This could kill you. Well, I'm not saying I can kill you, but I might hurt your feelings. And if I hurt your feelings, that's not my problem. That's your problem. You need to deal with your feelings. Not my job to worry about your feelings. So I'm going to say a couple of things that I want you to be aware of. When I look for work, I'm looking for work, and in this context, on a painting. Anything that competes with that composition, the laying on of the brush strokes, the selection of color, the choosing of form, the careful balance that has to take place, anything that detracts from that means that your eye is not seeing the art. Your eye is seeing something else. And I'm speaking specifically, fair warning, of signatures. I know branding is a very big catchphrase today, but your brand is your painting, not your name. Put it on the back. Consider this. Put it on the back. If you've carefully worked on a painting for hours and hours, or for 20 minutes painting on plein air, and you choose a color that's jarring and has no relationship to the painting you just made, is that painting a success? In my book, as an art historian, the answer is no. Careful about that sort of thing. The carefully constructed signature is a distraction from your art. I know they're beautiful and you worked real hard on them. That's great. Put them on the back. Because in the history books, nobody's making a reproduction of your signature if you make it in the book. You hear what I'm saying? I don't mean to, I don't feel like I'm yelling at you. I'm not. It's something that I saw throughout the show. And it was a distraction. And it actually, ultimately, in my mind, helped cancel out some really, really fine paintings that were a deterrent. Please be careful. Choose wisely before you do that. One of the other things that, as an art historian in American art, is, and again, I'm not politically correct, it's just by my peer observation, is particularly with Texas art, women have been shoved off to the side. Now, I curated one of the first early Texas artists exhibition for women in 1993. I did it again in 2006 for the Women's Museum in Dallas. And I will let you know that forthcoming in the spring from Texas A&M University Press will be a comprehensive look at women artists of Texas with multiple authors, multiple essays, and various artists. Because, and this is interesting, and I learned this just a few minutes ago, and this drives me for what I'm fixing to say. Unfortunately, here in Texas, and this actually happened a lot on the frontier, women were the organizers, and many of those women laid down their brushes for the greater good of art making, and that's exactly what happened here. Barbara and all the others who were part of this, Treva and so on, laid down their brushes to bring Plein Air Texas here. We need to be aware of that, the sacrifice that happens particularly for women. So if you look historically here in the state, the first art museum in Texas was founded at Fort Worth by a group of women who insisted that the new Carnegie Library have an art museum attached to it. And they laid down their brushes to do it. So thank them in a different, more profound way before we leave this space. To think about the sacrifices they have made. They're artists too, and they have been unable to satisfy that burning thing in all of y'all's guts that tells you if you don't make art today, you're gonna die. It's what killed Van Gogh. It's what burned up Michelangelo. Okay, I'm going to talk about the art now. As I said before, I want to see art. So when Barbara charged me with the 10th Anniversary Celebration Award, she's running up here. I made a mistake. Okay. She's tough. Anyway, I was told to find something that symbolized San Angelo and also was fun. And I saw that right away, this painting that you see right here. What greater celebration than eating chocolate? And especially Cowboy Up chocolate. But it's also painted with a loose brush stroke, as you can see. I mean, the person who painted this painting could have gone in with the one hair brush and painted all the little swirls and all that kind of stuff. But we have to keep in mind that the great Grant Wood once said, we aren't making colored photographs, we're making paintings. So keep that in mind. And so the celebration of joy is what comes through this, and how creative. The first thing that comes in her welcome packet is a box of chocolates. Well, who doesn't like that? And so that was a pretty easy one, and I love the different choices in color. Of course, driven by what this artist saw, but at the same time, chocolates aren't made in a machine, even though they are. There is some variety in there, and I love the variety in this particular painting. I only have an hour, and I thought that Barbara said an hour per painting, so I'm not supposed to do that. Anyway, so you're off the hook. Okay, twins, I think, is next. Mr. Lewis. Don't worry, I won't make you come up here. Outstanding, good. I lecture better when I can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so as I said, you know, there are impactful paintings that'll grab you right away. And I always told my students, because I taught art history at West Texas A&M for 18 years, and I challenged them because many of them came in and art history was not necessarily a requirement, and many of them were fairly new to art making. And I always told them that, to me, a great painting should punch you in the stomach, should grab your heart and squeeze it, or make you choke up. I also believe that art should be morally, spiritually, intellectually uplifting. And whenever something grabs you right away, that means that that painting is a success. And when I saw twins, I was drawn to it immediately. Architectural painting is always a challenge, particularly with those artists who are familiar with the making of architectural drawings and so on. It's so easy to fall in the trap of simply being a stand-in for a camera. But the feeling of architecture, because I believe that spirit lives in places, as the Apaches tell us, spirit lives in places. And what does that architecture, what do these buildings tell us in terms of its story? And I believe all paintings tell a story. And so what do twins tell us? And it's not just the architecture of the twin barns, but it's also that gate that leans up against one of them. And also the freshness of the laying in of the paint stroke. William H. Gertz, who's one of the great scholars on American Impressionism, always talked about what Impressionist painting really required, and it really required the use of prismatic colors and a comma-like brush stroke. Now, I know that this is not an Impressionist exhibition, it's a plein air exhibition, but these things are used, these strategies are used in this painting all over the surface. I also love the leading into the foreground. And a daring and bold use of foreground is always a challenge for the artist. There are several other examples in the exhibition, and I'd encourage you to go see those. I also like the light filtering through the ruins of the backside of the barn. And I asked Mr. Lewis, you know, cagily as I do, had he painted there before, because it felt like he was quite familiar, and I thought I'd seen a photograph of him painting it, and he said, really not too often. And so I thought the freshness really came through in this particular architectural painting and won the Architectural Painting Award. Thank you. Come on up. So the Water Lily Award isn't really fair to you artists, frankly, because of course you've got to compete with a guy named Claude Monet, who kind of did it pretty well. So it's a bit of a challenge, and I get that, and many of you made really fine examples, but what I loved here was, once again, the freshness of the brush stroke, an unaltered brush stroke. Lay it in, walk away, lay it in, walk away, lay it in, walk away. Because one of the worst, and the death knell that sounds for the plein air painter is to overwork it. Lay it on, and I know Hans Hofmann always says the hardest part was what you leave out. And the tendency is, I gotta make that correction. No, you don't. No, you don't. So as art historians, we want to get the paintings away from you as quickly as possible so you don't mess them up. And that's what I felt when I saw this wonderful painting by Carolyn Lindsay. It's just really wonderful and simple and dignified, and the purity and the simplicity of just laying in those basically about 4 colors is really quite powerful. So less is more in this particular painting. Thanks. So Barbara, I didn't get to start till late, so I hope I'm not. Okay, so this is Hirsch Agrawal. I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhere close to your name. Okay, so Spirit of San Angelo. You know, I had the great opportunity. I've done a lot of preservation history with architecture in my career. Most of that was in Amarillo, but I do get consulted on various things that are going on. And the idea that you had your luncheon in the Cactus Hotel was very attractive to me, especially going into that grand lobby with the ceramic tile and then going up to the ballroom to have lunch. And then to see that the artist painted from the top of the cactus was really exciting, and there were several really fine examples of painting from the top of the cactus as well as in downtown San Angelo. But to be able to capture not only downtown San Angelo, because here's what I've learned. Living in Amarillo, Texas, or close to Amarillo, Texas, I lived in Canyon, of course, which is 15 miles south of Amarillo. Amarillo didn't like the fact that you had a little brother that close, but they always like to put on airs. And the thing is West Texas big towns, and frankly, Amarillo's a big town, so is San Angelo, don't want to hurt your feelings, but that's the way it is. It's a big town, and it has some sophistication, and that protection of that sophistication is very common in frontier towns and little cities. Abilene has it, of course, Wichita Falls has it, and so on. So one of the great things about that I saw in this painting is not only the skill with the watercolor, because you all know this, especially those who paint in watercolor, it's the most unforgiving medium. You know how fast this turns to mud, that fast. And then you got to start all over again. You can't sop it up because we see it. So it's unforgiving. And so the application of the paint was very, very precise, but also in some respects, in many respects, in fact, very much capturing the impression of what San Angelo downtown looked like from the top of the cactus. But my favorite part of this painting is the background, because San Angelo is a cow town, and you're only that far from the frontier. And that's what, to me, spoke to the spirit of San Angelo, is that, yes, it's a sophisticated city out in the middle of nowhere, because you're quite far away, very much like Amarillo is very far from everything. San Angelo is very far from everything. So you have to create your own culture. However, you brought in architects who made a beautiful downtown. You brought in makers of all different kinds, and yet you're very close to the frontier. It's that close, and I believe that's captured in this really, really fine watercolor. So thank you. The next award is Texas Precious Water Award. Look at the city manager going to work. I think you've got ranch land. Let's swap for just a second. There's water. There we go. There we go. By Mr. Sneery. The greatest challenge in the American West is water. It drove everything and drives everything even today, particularly the misuse of water. Now, I know I keep referring to where I live, but these challenges are also true here. I drove down to see the great spur maker and bitten spur maker Wilson Capron at his studio at Christoval yesterday morning, because Barbara hadn't called me to my duties quite yet. And when I crossed the Concho River, I saw water running over the spillway south of town. I'd never seen that before. And I like to joke that here in West Texas, in many of the rivers, we don't feel obliged to put water in them and call them water, call them rivers, because that's often the case. But the Concho always runs, or the forks of the Concho nearly always run. But in many of the smaller bodies of water, that's not the case. Unfortunately, there are those, and I'll just call them politicians for short, who like to ignore the low water table and the shortage of water that's in West Texas, because they think everything looks like, pardon me, I forget the name of the artist who lives in Vermont. This ain't Vermont. And so putting center pivot irrigation out here to try to grow corn out here and suck the Ogallala Aquifer dry is a horrific mistake. So don't put ethanol in your car. Just my own little protest, Jim. There you go. But that's why we have Missouri and Nebraska and Iowa to grow corn. Because you know what? There's something called the Missouri River there. Out here, water is scarce, and water is worshipped, and water is precious. And so this particular painting, Lifting Fog, I thought encapsulated that wonderful rainfall that you got recently, because obviously rivers stock tanks, ponds, lakes are brimming right now. But it was only a couple of days ago when they weren't. Y'all know that. You know what it's like when we start to shrink up. But the other part is the water in the atmosphere, which is always so welcome. And that was true this morning during the paint out, is water in the atmosphere. And that's a challenge for the plein air painter. Mr. Sneary is an excellent artist, particularly with the detail he can achieve in watercolor. In this case, I love the freshness and once again, that dignity and simplicity, laying down the color and walking away. And that's what I saw here. Not only the capturing of the newly realized rains, but also what that did to the atmosphere and how precious that is here in West Texas. So thank you, sir. So the next is the Texas Ranchland Award. And, you know, with my work in MrGrauer, I felt I had to follow him all over, everywhere he went in West Texas. And I was able to do that in Colorado, in northern New Mexico, from the Texas Panhandle down as far south as Terlingua. That's about as far south as he went. He once made a pastel sketch called Out into Mexico, and he's actually looking across the river when he paints that painting. And if you drive any of that country or you spend any time in that country, you know what it looks like. And I've written before about MrGrauer. He saw beauty in where most people saw a rawness. And so the critics in New York City and Philadelphia and Boston and so on, who were the arbiters of taste in the 19th century into the 20th century and even today, when they see painters like you coming out here to places like the Concho Valley or here in and around San Angelo, they don't believe the colors that you see. They think there's something wrong with your color sense. That's still true. They may make gestures towards you, but they don't understand it because they come from a place of wetness and where everything is green. The great Wallace Stegner said, if you want to be a success in the West, you have to forget the color green. This ain't Kentucky. The pastures don't look like that. 40 acres per cow is still not enough. And so capturing the ranch land, as we see in this great painting by Mr. Hamilton, it's fabulous because he cuts right to the chase of the rawness, the scrub, the mesquite trees, the junipers, all those different pieces of vegetation where a little bit of bunch grass might feed that cow for a few bites full and then go on and find the next bit. And that's pasture land. But people east of the Mississippi, they don't understand that. They've never seen anything like that. So I love the fact that he captured that rawness and saw the beauty where most people simply saw the rawness. So this is a beautiful tribute to West Texas rangeland, sir. Thank you. Laura, do you want to come up and talk about in just a second, you want to come up and talk about the museum selection? Yeah, great. Okay, so Mr. White, are you here? Yeah. So Lost in Work, this one really appealed to me because an interior with watercolor has its own challenges because the light is always much, much dimmer. And so the bits and pieces of surfaces that are struck by light, especially interior light, and as I understand it, y'all were driven inside during the rainstorm, so you painted it on that day, is that correct? So therefore, you're dealing with an outside light that's greatly diffused. You're also dealing with trying to capture interior artificial light. And I'm reminded of the fact that the great Robert Henry, founder of the Ashcan School, who loved Spain, made 7 trips to Spain during his lifetime. And he thought he could go to New Mexico and see a little bit of Spain when he went out there, I believe as early as 1916. However, when he got out to New Mexico and experienced what some have called the faraway nearby, in other words, the intensity of the light in New Mexico, he was driven indoors. So everything Robert Henry produced in New Mexico is painted under artificial light. Think about that. So there's a challenge with interior light, and you painted this at Letty's. Letty's has great big front windows. It's one of my favorite places to go when I come to San Angelo because I'm fascinated by process, and most people are. So one of the great things is that Mr. White stacked this painting rather than a horizontal interior view of Letty's, actually attempted to show literally the building of the boot up. That's what I see, that's my interpretation. And so the different bits and pieces, the different cubby holes, if you've ever been in a bootmaking shop. And I was fortunate in, I think the last time I was here, I got a 3-hour tour. It sounds like Gilligan's Island. 3-hour tour of the Letty's boot building operation in the back. But the important thing is you don't want to bother the bootmaker because they're always lost in their work. Don't just distract them. Much like I know you all are very patient when you're painting out of doors and people want to come up and say, you know, I can't even draw a straight line. You've only heard that about 1 billion times, right? How do you do that? You're far more gentle than I am, you know. But in any case, the same thing is true with the bootmakers. These are artists, people. These are artists. Yes, their artwork is worn on your foot, but nevertheless, these are artists. And so the Lost in Your Work, it's a great title. And by the way, sometimes I wish we could get a hold of you before you title things. Don't get cute. Don't do that. That's for a Hallmark card, okay? But in any case, being lost in work shows all the different pieces, but flowing it together. And one of my favorite parts is the fan. That's great because it's honest. And honest work is something that should be revered, and you revere it in this painting, sir. Much obliged. I'm going to ask Laura Huckabee to come up and talk about the Museum Purchase Award, if that's okay.
Okay, do we have an image of that or the painting itself? Yes. So the Museum Purchase Award, we chose it yesterday, myself and our curatorial assistant, Shady Watson. It's Letty Girls by Kirsten Anderson. The first thing that hit me about this painting was the color. Wow, it's astonishingly beautiful. The color just popped out, but it's about more than that. There are multiple things that we look for in a Museum Purchase Award. First of all, of course, we look for an excellent painting, but there are a lot of excellent paintings here. So what else are we looking for? Part of it is what does it say about San Angelo? The fact that this was painted at the interior of Letty's, that was important to us, and I could just echo a lot of the things that Michael had to say about the worker at work in making boots. In this case, a woman behind these beautiful sewing machines, themselves just gorgeous in their structure, and that, to me, it's iconic. It's iconic of our community. It's an institution that's been here for many years. I don't know, how old is Letty's? It's over 100 years old, I believe. It's been here a while, anyway. And we didn't have an interior scene. We've been collecting these plein air paintings over the past 9 years. No interior scenes in the collection yet. That's also something to consider. Another thing that we consider in our selection is the style, the medium, the artist. Is this something that's represented in our collection yet? All of those are things that we think about when we choose the award. And I mean, really, the simple answer is the color popped out and drew my attention, and then the painting just spoke to my heart. It spoke to me emotionally. I'm not going to bring in a lot of art historical reference because when I was getting my master's degree, my area of focus was Italian Renaissance. So it's a little bit different from Michael's area of focus. But I'll point out that there's something about this picture that references medieval and Renaissance paintings, the jewel-like colors, the gilded-looking surfaces of the yellow and the gold coloration in that. There's something almost sacred about it, like a stained glass window. But in any case, I love it, and I'm the curator, and I get to choose it, so there.
How's that for a strong woman? How about that? So I'm going to say something real quick about the painting. Don't take it off the screen for just a second. As a Cowboy historian, I do know that the Singer sewing machine that they're using right here are the same ones they still use in boot shops, and they're from the turn of the century, the last century. So they're about a 1905, 1910 model. Because they're so good and because of their construction is so fine, you cannot replace them with more newfangled models, and I'll say it that way. So in most boot shops, the stitchers are nearly always women. Never fails. And that's the decoration that captures most people's fascination, I might even say obsession with cowboy boots today, is the tops. And that's where the art really comes in. Yes, there's artistry in the construction of the vamp and the toe bug and the counter and the heel and all that, but the artistry really is in the tops. And it became a new canvas, literally a new canvas for artists like the woman depicted here. However, they don't sign them. So remember, the next time you put on a pair of cowboy boots, and I think I have 14 pair. I don't own any shoes other than athletic shoes. That's just me, because it's a bit of a sickness, I'm afraid to say. But remember that more than likely a woman artist made your boots and did the artwork that's on them. So anyway, great. And by the way, it was a bit of a problem because I thought I was going to have to pick for the San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts, and I was very uncomfortable. So we had a meeting on the sly, a clandestine meeting, and Laura patted me on the shoulder and says, no, I get to pick. And I was so relieved. So great choice. I think we're to Mr. Brewer's Reservoir. Yeah. So needless to say, the water category kept playing in my mind, and there were so many worthy paintings of water. It was probably the toughest category for me. But when I saw Reservoir, and I saw the fact that it was, first of all, it was a horizontal composition, and because of Mr. Ray, who painted almost exclusively horizontals, except when he was painting water. This is one of the few times Frank Ray would go vertical. And nearly always he painted a West Texas river vertically. So I have a soft spot for a horizontal composition, and when I saw that initially, I thought, wow, that's pretty spectacular, because the artist, and if you could orient this painting any direction, this is a very abstract painting. And the fact that it's color field painting, so think Mark Rothko when you see this painting. This is a very, very modern painting with this great stripe down the middle, obviously made by reflections on the edge of the stock pond and the reflections of the trees, but this is a very abstract painting, and I couldn't help but think of some of the other great American non-representational paintings like Richard Diebenkorn and so on, Fairfield Porter and so on. This is quite spectacular, so I kept being drawn back to this. And so as I said, it was a tough choice on picking the best depictor of water in that category, but I kept coming back to this because I love the fact that this is a very brave painting. There's very little narrative content here. There's very little storytelling here, and yet, on the other hand, it tells a great story of a stock tank brimming with water. And I had a chance to talk with Mr. Brewer about this painting this morning, and he talked about being a little perplexed as to what to paint on that particular day, and peeked up over the dam, and there it was. Because nature will provide you with the composition if you're willing to see it. And that's the challenge. This is why the plein air painter paints what they see. And if you're able to absorb it, you can be a conduit. Remember, you're not the source, you're the pipe. and the pipe must be free of obstruction for you to transfer that into something beautiful like this small canvas, or small board rather, as you see here. So thank you, Mr. Brewer. The second place award went to Hector Acuna for 5 painters. And being an art historian, of course, I approach these works of art, as I said before, I think I said this last night, I can't help but see these things through the lens of art history. And so, you know, the Impressionist painters love to paint themselves in their own paintings. They love to do that. Now, or they pose for each other. And so there was a lot of that going on. And so I was very interested in the narrative here of these 5 painters, and I wondered, how did Mr. Acuna accomplish this? Were there mirrors hanging on the side of the building? How did he accomplish this? And then I was fascinated by the blue pole, or the blue stripe that comes down at the right. You know, as much as you are the conduit, you're still a subjective vessel. And to be brave in making art is always a challenge. It's always safer to stay in your lane. But here, especially in the West, here in San Angelo and other parts of West Texas, the philosophy is high risk and high reward. So remember that, take risks. And it's pretty risky. That was a really nice narrative painting, and suddenly there's a blue stripe that comes out of nowhere down the right side. That's brave. That's very brave. And he does it again. There's another small painting in the show by Mr. Acuna where it's 7/8 foreground, which flips the whole Dutch magic from the 17th century, Van Ruysdael and other artists like that, who lower the horizon down where it's 1 inch above the bottom of the picture plane, and the rest is sky. So Mr. Acuna flipped that on that other canvas, and yet he puts a telephone pole right directly in the center. Wait, he broke that rule. You're never supposed to do that. But he did it anyway. So this is a very young artist who I think is a bit of a rock star these days. That's what I keep hearing, is he's a fast ascending. And it was a hard choice as to decide who was second and who was first on this. I'll say more about the grand prize winner here in just a second, but I'm still fascinated by this painting because, once again, I'm reminded of the non-figurative painters. And yet it's really quite narrative, as you can see. So I see Frederick Basile in here, those of you who know art history. Basile is standing in there. Renoir is standing in there. Monet. And I think the recognition of the shoulders of giants that you all stand on is really important. And I think this is perhaps a window or a doorway into time. I don't know. Maybe it's a time machine. Anyway, I think it's quite fascinating. It's very, very bold, very, very brave. And I hope Mr. Acuna keeps pushing that envelope until he tears right through it. Thank you. And just for the record, I hope you all do that. Kick right through the envelope. You know, keep pushing, keep pushing. The Artist's Choice Best Body of Work Award, I don't think you can carry everything up here. That's okay. Went to Jeff Steiner. So you'll have to go look at those on your own. There they are, right there. Excellent facility with the, and I mean that in the positive sense, okay? Excellent facility with the ability with the brush. Really a terrific eye for architectural detail, and also populating all the different cityscapes and sidewalks with various figures, as you can see. I also love the limited palette, and that may have been dictated by the day, but I do love the limited palette. I think that's important here. You can get lost in doing cityscapes, and I see this a lot, in all the signage, and making sure all the letters are painted on the signs. That's a distraction. When you're looking at this, can you really see the letters? Are you reading the letters? Or are you seeing what you know rather than what you see? Are you painting what you know rather than what you see? And I especially appreciate this here, this painting down here in the lower left. I can't see the title. But I also look, when I judge an art show, I love to see consistency. Because there are artists who really pop one, and then the rest of them are okay. There's high consistency and accomplishment in this entire body of work. So bravo, Mr. Steiner, for really bringing your A game. Let's come on up. Vlad Duchev, am I pronouncing that anywhere close? Okay, Vlad Duchev. In Previous Water, a curious title. And sometimes we can get bogged down in titles when we're looking at works of art. And so I kept coming back to this painting over and over again. And every time I did, more of the story was unfolding. And I'm going to come, I guess this is pretty blurry, so I'm going to come down. How long can you hold that? So my first reaction to the painting was, well, that's a nice river scene. That's terrific. Captured all the colors, got a nice bit of perspective in the bend in the river. And sometimes, and I should have said this a little earlier, and I don't mean this to use specifically here, but one of the things I meant to say to you earlier is one of the artists I've worked on for about 30 years is one of the Taos artists, W. Herbert Dunton. And Dunton is one of those artists who's cursed with the mere illustrator title. Over and over again, the art historians always referred to him as the mere illustrator of the group, forgetting that Ernest Blumenschein, Oscar Burninghouse, Joseph Henry Sharp, and so on were all illustrators. And here's where I really like to throw you a curveball. The great Georgia O'Keeffe was an illustrator to put beans on the table. Don't forget that. Sometimes you have to make commercial art to eat. However, one of the things that Dunton struggled with is he was never able, in many art historians' minds, to shed that unfortunate mantle. Eventually, he became what he wanted to be, which was an easel painter, but he had to shed all the tricks that he learned as an illustrator. So gimmicks and tricks are things that I look for whenever I judge an art show like this. Because some of you probably worked as commercial artists in one time or another, and sometimes those gimmicks and tricks are shorthand to get to the accomplishment of the job. I would ask you to shed those tricks as soon as you can, because they have no place in easel painting. They're cute and interesting and might help you focus, but once you're an easel painter, you have to let that go. Now, you might have to go back and do a commercial art job to put beans on the table. I don't begrudge you that at all. But with Dunton, it took him many, many years. He moved to Taos in 1915 after visiting there in 1912, but he still did illustration jobs through 1923, and he died in 36. So really only the last decade of his life was he able to shed the illustrator's curse, but still, with most art historians, he didn't shed it completely enough. Now, I think he did, of course. But the problem is that the illustrator is somehow connected to the market. When you paint, forget the market. I know you gotta eat. I get it. And the Plein Air Painting magazine and all those things, that's great, that's wonderful. But first things first, make great art. Shed the tricks, shed the gimmicks, make great art. And so when I looked at this painting, I'm always looking that way. I'm looking for the gimmick. And when you don't satisfy my cynical self, that's when you got me. You got me hooked. So the bend in the river, and I started seeing a great Dunton painting he did. And that Dunton painting is about this big. And there was snow and ice on the river outside Taos where he painted it. And he did a nearly identical bend in the river. And then John Henry Twachtman popped up while I'm looking there. And even Whistler and some of the other great water painters. And as I looked even further, I started to see the reflection of the sky here. Perhaps obvious to you immediately, but it wasn't to me. And what about this green color and that Previous Water title? Is he talking about sediments that are washing down the river? Perhaps. But he's also talking about the reflection of the brush that you don't see. And that's the great storytelling part of this picture, is what you don't see. Because there should be a relationship between the viewer and the artist through this conduit. What does the viewer bring to the painting? What do you feel in your gut? Remember what I said, it should punch you in the stomach squeeze your heart, or punch you in the nose. So the edge of the river that you don't see, it actually projects out into our space, beyond the picture plane, and suddenly we're in another world. That's the coaxing that a great plein air painting will do, because we're participating in how Mr. Duchev saw the river here. With the placement of each brushstroke, if you'll swing around here for just a second, not just on the bank, but how do you do that without the crispness that you would see in seeing the brush that's up here, or the cottonwood trees, or the mesquites, or the live oaks, or whatever line this. And you have to let go of yourself, your tendency to be too descriptive. Remember, we have to leave a little bit out. Leave a little bit out. Don't give the viewer everything, because then you don't hook them. You give them the whole, I mean, it's like reading the book from chapter 1 to the end of the chapter that fast. You don't want to do that. You want to coax them a little bit. And so I was coaxed by this picture, and I kept coming back and thinking, I saw one more thing. Oh, and there's a, and what are these dots? What do they do? Are they pings of light? More than likely. Did he see them again? Probably not. You remember there's an old saying, you can't dip your toe in the same river twice. So is this merely a snapshot, or is it timeless? That's what the great artist does, is brings timelessness to a brief snapshot as a plein air painter. How do you capture that and make the tale of the tongue be told again and again? And that's what I think is captured here in Mr. Duchev's work. Thank you. So in 1923, H.D. Bugbee, an artist from Clarendon, wrote a letter to Mr. Dunton, and he had sent him some, I think he'd actually sent some original paintings to Mr. Dunton for his critiques. And Mr. Bugbee was then working as a commercial illustrator. And Dunton said, and this is 23 now, he's about to give up his illustration career completely. He had illustrated one of Zane Grey's serialized books, Wanderer of the Wasteland, I believe for McClure's magazine. And he did all the painting on grisaille. Now he'd been painting easel paintings for 8 years by this time, because he'd moved to Taos in 1915 and gave up illustration forever, at least in his own mind. But he started to need money, and so he made that jump. So that same year, Mr. Bugbee sent him some art to critique. And what he said was, when you're working as a commercial artist, you have to make a storytelling picture. And you have to lead them into the painting and back and forth across the canvas and never out of the picture, never let them out. I think that's where the separation between illustration, commercial artwork, and easel painting is we have to let the viewer out, and we also have to draw them in. And that's what you all have done here with this exhibition with plein air painting, is we've painted with you. Not exactly with you, but we were maybe in your hip pocket. Maybe we were in your front pocket. And if you succeeded in the canvases, the watercolors that you did, the pastels that you did, we are participants with you, and we get to go along for the ride. We get to enjoy that vicariously. And those of us who love art, and like me, like I said, I went to art school thinking that I was going to be an artist, but I don't have that burning thing in my gut that said, I damn sure better make a work of art today or it's going to burn me up. And you all know that. You know that. I don't have that. But I get to go along and ride your coattails. So thank you for sharing your mastery with us. Thank you for sharing your talents with us. Thanks for sharing your passion with us, and especially your commitment. Because making art is a commitment. It's also a risk. And remember, high risk, high reward. Thank you.